Hi, I'm Mike, the Hermit of Lockyer. Come with me this morning on a hike and let's have a conversation. This morning I'm going to do something different. I'm on a hike around the lake with my dog Greta. Hey Greta, can you say hi? Recently, I follow probably 5 or 6 individuals who do YouTube videos online, and plus other lectures. The ones I follow are astrophysics, archaeology, anthropology. But the other day I was watching one with an anthropologist who was on a hike, and the hike had nothing to do with anthropology. But he was wondering how it would turn out, and it turned out really well. I enjoyed being with him on his hike in Oregon. So I'm going to try to do that this morning. I'm behind in my schedule of doing videos for several reasons, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. I think the real reason is my health, and been a little bit depressed, and I'll explain that. And it was hard to get the, not courage, but the energy is the best word to say. My dog is pulling me around. Greta, honey, we're not going that way. So that's why I'm delaying this. Today's topic was going to be, or it is still going to be, emotional dishonesty. Last time was on factual dishonesty. And then I'll come back at the end of this. I'm going to do some personal commentary because I'm not sure how many more of these I'm going to do. I was very seriously considering not doing any more, but I'm decided to do at least this one more. Last time when I was talking about factual dishonesty, I want to point out the problem with that. Oh, there's tons of problems. But just an example of some problems. So I use the example of the young earth creationist who start with a dogma, the earth is 6,000 years old, and then they try to force all the evidence to support that, and there is no evidence for that. So then they attack the other side, saying that the scientists who spent their lives studying geology and anthropology and archaeology and radiometric dating and these things are all stupid, or worse, there's a conspiracy among them to harm Christianity. So and these people go around speaking in churches all over the country telling them this nonsense. So then what you have are people who are not only ignorant, but they think all science, everything outside this bubble of evangelicalism is a conspiracy. So there's many ramifications of that. And one of those, during our COVID pandemic, 1.1 million people died, horrible deaths from COVID. And it's hard to estimate this, but more than half of those died for no good reason. They died because they did not believe in the vaccine. They did not trust the scientists. They did not believe in treatments. A lot of them didn't even believe that COVID was real. And the biggest group are the evangelical groups who now hold these viewpoints. And the reason they do is they've been beat over their head that science is not real, that you can't find truth except through God, that God speaks truth to your brain, but evidence doesn't matter. All these crazy things of epistemology of how we find knowledge. So it has real life consequences. And now I dread what's going to be coming in the next few years because there's a big drop in childhood vaccinations. The biggest group of that are homeschooling evangelicals that do not want their child vaccinated because they do not trust the scientists, because the young earth creationists have been telling them for years that the scientists are stupid or they're corrupt. So this has real life consequences. So that was finishing up on my last idea about the loss of factual truth. And I'm going to drift into a bridge between that topic and the one on loss of emotional truth. I was living in Marquette, Michigan, and I've been going to a big evangelical church. And there's all this nonsense that kept coming out. I was trying my best to work within that framework of that church, and there's just crazy stuff that people were saying. I won't go into all those details, but I eventually decided to start a home church with great ambitions. I think I mentioned this before. Worked very, very hard in studying for a year about home church movement, going out and visiting home churches. And then we just advertised that we had a home church group. So what we got were the 5 families that were the nuttiest families in the whole community. They'd already been kicked out of the evangelical church. I wanted people who were honest and thinking. So we had one couple that believed we all have to become Jews before we can be good Christians, and they were Jews who were also Christians, and they were also telling us how much better they were than us. And I didn't know at the time, but the husband of that group had a mistress that came out soon after this church disbanded. There's another guy and his wife, I may have mentioned this before. He forced her to wear veils. He was abusive to her. He beat her in the name of God. So I'm confronting this guy, and he had weapons that he was going to fight Bill Clinton. So that's craziness on that side. Then another family, the woman was a prophet, she said. And God would speak these magical things in her ears that were just crazy. She declared there were demons in her house because a fly, God spoke to a fly on her shoulder and told her our house was full of demons. So then she went to do an exorcist on, just crazy, crazy stuff. So I left. I finally disbanded after a year, this home church, because it was ridiculous. I couldn't, even though I was a leader, I had no control of these people. And it was talking about Barbie Land, this was Barbie Land on steroids. So I had started teaching a class at the library on philosophy. And 2 guys that came were actually Christians. Most of them weren't. And these guys had graduated with degrees from a Reformed seminary, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which has a good reputation for most part. And they mentioned they go to the big Reformed church in town, and they were hesitant, but they said that I might find that to be a good church. So I took my family to the Reformed church. We're going to join it. The very first Sunday, the speaker, not the pastor, but this guy who introduces the pastor, he does announcements, got up and said, he's a shortwave radio operator, and he talks to Christians around the world. And he said he's been talking to Christians in India who said that Jesus is alive there, has been alive there for 10 years, and is going around raising people from the dead by the thousands and thousands. But the governments want to keep it quiet as part of this conspiracy theory. Okay, imagine you're a rational person, just for a second. How is it possible that Jesus could be alive in India for 10 years, raising thousands of people from the dead, and no one knows about it except this little shortwave group? I was so discouraged. And I thought, there is no place within Christendom. So I left that church that morning, and I can't remember what happened, but somehow the person that's sitting behind me is a middle-aged lady and 2 young men, and they could tell that I was not real happy with how church had went, because I was just trying to digest all this crazy talk I heard all morning within the walls of this church. Lies, factual lies. So we I took our kids out to Ponderosa Steakhouse, which was our big treat in those days. And we got there, and of all things, this lady and the 2 guys, I don't think they followed us, but they came in behind us and took a seat at a table beside us. I didn't want to talk to them. Well, one of the reasons I didn't want to talk to them, that in the church service, they were behaving, really crazy stuff. But I won't go into that. But anyway, I'm sitting there, my back to them, and the lady says, "What is your name?" And I told her my name. She says, "Do you have the Holy Spirit?" And I'm going, "Oh no, yes, I have the Holy Spirit." Well, God said to us, "You don't. Right here, we're going to baptize you here in Ponderosa, with be filled with the Holy Spirit, and you'll have all these miracles happen in your life too." I literally got up, left my steak, went out to our van, and just lay down and cried. I cried because I felt like there was no place of sanity anywhere within the church. So I'm still talking about factual dishonesty. Of course, there's thousands of people are not being raised from the dead in India. Someone's lying somewhere. But it gets you a lot of respect in churches, unfortunately, when you have these sensational experiences. Fake miracles are very, very common. And that's one of the reasons I left evangelicalism, which I now call Barbie Land. So I want to try to describe what I mean by emotional dishonesty, because that was the number one reason I left evangelicalism. I described before being a missionary and arriving in the Middle East, and part of me is a very honest person, and noticing how much the missionaries in Cyprus hated each other, but they pretended to love each other. And that was just not the last straw. It was just one aspect of what I've been living in over 25 years at that point. But let me get to the root of this emotional dishonesty issue, and then try to explain it better. Here's the fallacy. Within the Christian world, especially evangelicalism, but really most of the Christian world, there's a false concept, a false narrative, that when you become a Christian, your life is filled with really bad stuff. Everything in your life is bad. And then by certain activities, going to church, studying the Bible, praying, that your life is gradually transformed over time into this brand new person. Now, there's some verses that people can use, and I'm not going to go into that here, to justify that way of thinking. But so then you get to the point that you actually believe that you are almost perfect compared to especially these people who are not Christians. You make these huge assumptions. If your neighbor's an atheist, then they're probably doing drugs, they're probably gay, they're probably doing abortions. You just demonize them, that they're bad people. But on the inside, this circle of Christianity, everyone is really good, really, really good, almost perfect. That's why, was it Bill Haggard is his name, that I think I mentioned before, that led the evangelical church that turned out that was doing crack cocaine and having gay sex with prostitutes on the side. His greatest sin, though, wasn't doing drugs. It was standing in a podium at church every Sunday preaching against homosexuality. We are the family values people. It's the hypocrisy that is the greatest sin in his life. And in most of these evangelicals, they get caught in these bad things. So that false narrative sets you up thinking that you are so superior to other people that you start to develop this emotional dishonesty about your own motives. And I had several stories I wanted to tell to try to illustrate this. But some of these stories I hesitate, but one of the stories I'll tell. So I was in this Navigator discipleship group back in the 80s, and one of our really dynamic men felt called to have a ministry with women. Now, my eyebrows went up, because you have to understand that our group was very strict about men not associating with women. We didn't date. None of that stuff. So for him, out of the blue, to say God had called him to have a ministry in a women's dorm with women, that's where, and I said, yeah, that sounds convenient. He said, oh, I don't know what you're thinking. This is pure motives. I just love their souls, and I think of them as my sisters, and he's very defensive about that. So this went on for a year or so in this women's dorm. But I saw him at a medical conference 20 years later, and we're having a long private discussion, and we were getting more and more intimate in our discussions. So at this conference, we're having this really private talk, and he had been a decent friend, and hadn't seen him in all these years, so we're talking more. But he got to the point of describing to me that when he had his Bible study in the dorm back 20 some years earlier with these girls, he said he did it for the simple reason he was very horny. I'm serious. That's what he said. And he wanted to be around girls. As a matter of fact, he started praying for hours with a girl after the Bible study. And eventually they started laying down on the couch together, praying together, laying prone on the couch. And then they started stripping off naked under a blanket. Never had sex, he said. And I think he's being honest. But it was that emotional dishonesty that he had convinced himself and us that his motives were so pure because he was a godly disciple. That's sort of a weird example. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, that when you enter the Christian world, you have to pretend that suddenly you're the saint. You have to pretend that all your motives are pure. You have to pretend that everyone in the church's motives are pure. When we were humans first, we're animals. This guy illustrated. I'm going to tell one more about emotional dishonesty to help illustrate this better. I'll think about it if I need to come back for that. Greta, girl, where are you going? We're going this way. So after I had left Christianity, played around with agnosticism, atheism for a few years, and my wife really wanted me to come back to the church. I decided to come back to the evangelical church. Now that I'd figured some things out, and I was going to try to make it better. But one of the things I want to bring with me when I came back to the evangelical church is honesty. We were so dishonest about everything. So I decided to come back with just honesty and see how that would work. And I thought I was doing it as an example. Well, I was an elder at this church, and one of the topics that had been coming up was people coming to church late. That really bothered the pastor, that trying to get things started on time. So that was a high priority in my life, getting to church on time. So we had 5 young kids. So Denise's priority was different in evangelical order. Her being a mom and mother, her coming to church with children who were clean, who had on unwrinkled clothes, who were behaving well, was more important. I've said once before that the Sunday morning evangelical church, I suspect, is one of the most pretentious places in the world. And I think it's probably one of the places where kids get beaten the most after church for misbehaving, because it embarrasses the parents who are trying to live up to this facade. But anyway, one Sunday, I'm sure Denise and I were arguing about this issue. I wanted to get to church on time, and she wanted to, change somebody's shirt in the car, go back home, get the shirt because it's got it's got syrup on it or something, whatever. So we're now, again, 5 or 10 minutes late to church. And I arrive at church, and I come in the door, and I felt so embarrassed. She was feeling embarrassed. I understand. Clothes been dirty. I was feeling embarrassed for coming to church late. But there's an elder in the vestibule of the church, one that had sat with me in all these meetings where the pastor was really irritated people come to church late. So he gave me the benefit of the doubt. He said, boy, traffic must have been bad this morning. There was no traffic. And the old Mike, the old dishonest Mike, would have said, oh yeah, traffic was terrible. And lied. That's emotional dishonesty, because I'm trying to live up. That would be the best excuse for coming to church late. But instead, I looked at him and said, no, Denise and I were having an argument, and it got us late. So I didn't think there'd be harm from that. And then a few months later, he approaches me at an elders meeting and says, are you and Denise still having marital trouble? I didn't know what he's talking about. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you told me that you fight a lot. I said, I never said that, because we don't. He said, well, that morning in church, you came in. Oh, I simply said we were having an argument in the car. So you have to pretend that married couples are perfect. They never have arguments. So this is this emotional dishonesty. Now I'm going to pivot here and go back to the beginning for just a second, because I'm not sure if this will be my last videotape or not. I haven't decided. But I want to talk about the whole purpose of me doing these things. Here's the problem. There's a mass exodus out of the church today. And they were being told they have one choice: conform to this culture, church culture, and all of its negativity, or leave completely and become atheist. Basically, that's what it is, or, you know, Buddhist or whatever. I am not doing videos to entice people to leave the church. I'm not. I think there's wonderful people in the church, and they love it, and I'm so glad for them. I've never been one that loved organized religion. I haven't been honest about it until more recently. And that's just me. But if people love organized religion, I think good for them. Good for them. There's wonderful people at the church I'm affiliated with. Wonderful people. And I say this honestly, people better than me. So never would I be doing videotapes just to criticize the church for the sake of criticism. But it's trying to introduce a type of honesty for those people who are already thinking, this is crazy. This is nonsense. And to say, yeah, you're right, it is nonsense. But you don't have to throw out the historical Jesus with this church, this whole church tradition, this culture. That's the point I've been trying to make, and I hope people haven't misunderstood this. I feel like there's very little place left for thinking Christians. There are some things that's happening. There's some groups that talk about evidence-based Christianity, but the historical church has such massive control, and I don't mean one church, I mean just the culture of church, that if you say, okay, it's not working out for me, I'm going to stick with Jesus, and I'm going to stick with my Christian friends, just like the Bible says, don't forsake meeting together, get together with them, but I don't want to be part of this culture anymore. You'll have incredible pushback, and sadly, it leaves no space, and I'm trying to just whack my way through this wilderness, and no, there is space. There is space. I've said this before, but one thing that's happening right now as this great exodus out of the church is twofold. One is on the conservative side, they're going to war with the culture, saying it's the culture's fault. They want to take over the government and legislate abortion, they would love, as one pastor told me, to make it a capital offense to being gay, you know, being executed. That's what they want to do, some of them. And they think this way they're going to regain the culture by imposing this Sharia, Christian Sharia law. So that's one, and they demonize everyone who's not part of their culture. They demonize liberals, they demonize, Greta, honey, we're going to go this way, dear. I know it's longer this way. Let's go this way. You don't want, come on. She likes to take a shortcut. So that's what the conservative church is doing. But the liberal church is, you know, these people aren't showing up in statistics. But the more liberal churches are leaving, theologically, I guess I would say, Christianity while keeping the appearance of Christianity. And I think I go to a church like that, or I'm affiliated with one, and there's a big cross section of people. You'll find conservative evangelicals. Those are the ones who tend to want to punch me in the face when they read my blog. And then you have a growing group of more liberal people. But this past year, I thought I'd try to get more involved now as part of adult Sunday school or adult ministries program. I didn't fit. I think every suggestion I made was thought of as being quite stupid. But we were having a meeting, and I said, you know, I think it'd be interesting to have a Sunday school class just to look at what is the essence of Christianity? What is it that you must have to be able to still call it Christian? Because I know from personal experience, I go to a small group sponsored by the church that it favors, I would say it favors Buddhism over Christianity. So I asked that question, and people looked at me funny, and I said, okay, for example, let's start with the very basics. Jesus existed. Is that an essential? I thought everyone would say, yeah, oh yeah, of course. They didn't. They just stared at me like, well, you don't have to believe that Jesus existed. And then I said the resurrection. And again, I looked like a deer in the headlights, or they looked like a deer in the headlights. And one person said, Mike, you got to understand, there's good Christian people who don't believe that Jesus existed or believe in the resurrection. Can somebody explain that to me? I can't. So anyway, my point is, on the liberal side, I think there's a lot of people leaving the church while staying in the church. So I understand their MO. They don't want to be part of this conservative Christian culture, and they maintain the appearance of church, but then theologically adopting a postmodern viewpoint. There is no truth anymore. Nothing to hang a hat on. If I could catch my breath. So anyway, what I was saying, it's a little bit like, and I'm totally enthralled with the country of Iceland. I almost moved there in the 80s, and I love the country. I've been there 3 times. I'd love to go back. I follow it every day, the volcanic activity. And I have to give you a little view as I'm passing this spot on the trail. So anyway, I was talking about Iceland sitting on these tectonic plates, and it's pulling apart. So there's no space in the organized church for people like me, and I think there's more like me who want to be honest, who want to seek truth in an honest way, not dogmas. So in closing, I'm going to say that I stumbled across something online the other day, and I think it's YouTube algorithms set this up, because I used the word deconstruction in this talk, or in this group of talks, and it linked a talk of Christian deconstruction. Well, I did not know that Christian deconstruction was a term that's being used, and a conservative couple who have a very large media following, I think one of them was a pop star or a Christian singer or something, have just written a book against Christian deconstruction and giving up historical Christianity. So it reminds me of when I was with my boss in Egypt, who had incredible amount of emotional dishonesty. When I told him I was going to go back to the States and just start seeking truth at all costs, he warned me, no, don't do that. You'll become an atheist. Well, this book claims, I didn't read the book, I only heard a discussion about it, that if you start to deconstruct, Greta, if you start to deconstruct the Christian culture, you will become an atheist. And that's what my boss had warned me then. Okay, I've been doing this for over 30 years. Nowhere am I tempted to be an atheist, except when I listen to Richard Rohr or Rob Bell, or talk to my evangelical friends who spill out conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. And if I had to live in that world, I would definitely be an atheist, because it's so ridiculous to me. But anyway, I want to say that deconstructing the Christian culture, I think, has tremendous value if you go far enough. Now, in the 90s, I went so far, and I did start to become an atheist, but I didn't stop there. Then I started deconstructing atheism and agnosticism, and on until I ended up back in a position of believing in a historical Jesus as the Messiah, as a Redeemer, but seeing Christian culture for what it is. The emperor wears no clothes. It's so much of it is nonsense, but it's just culture. And if you like that, good for you. But if you don't, that's what I'm trying to create a space for. So, I found myself on this side of cancer after being in quarantine for years and becoming a hermit. I had really one good friend, and this good friend is a person with a very big heart, very kind to me over the years, 2 or 3 years that we've been friends. But I knew they were a conservative Christian, and that didn't bother me. We didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it. He assumed that I was, I think. And but he would say things that I totally disagree with. But I would never argue with him, because for what point? We have a wonderful friendship. And why would I want to argue with him about his core beliefs? I'm not going to change him. All it would do is build up animosity between us. So I just always was quiet when he said things that I disagreed with. But this summer, or late summer, maybe early fall, no, it's fall, he stumbled across my blog and started reading it, I guess. And we were getting together for a social meeting, and he had printed up, well, actually it was on his cell phone, my blog entry. And I say provocative things a lot. I describe my definition of religion. It may not be yours. You may have a very different religion experience. It's a human-made system for enhancing one's feeling of piety. To me, that's what religion was to me. And I suspect it is for more people than they realize. And also said that I don't like theology, the study of God, because it's layer and layer of quagmire of cultural considerations. But I really prefer to ask the big questions in philosophical language. Well, anyway, we're having a social meeting, and he arrived with this blog, and he may be saying it, if you were to interview him, he might say he didn't say it this way. But to me, for about 45 minutes to an hour, it came across, here's, Mike, your moral failures. You don't like religion. You can't know God unless you love religion. You prefer philosophy. Philosophy's from the devil. And so I just felt so beat up by my only friend, that I felt so discouraged for weeks, and even till now. You know, we have met and discussed this and made up. He's agreed not to criticize me anymore, or even to ask me any questions about what I believe, because I know he won't like what I state. But that event was very depressing for the fact it's happened to me over and over and over for 30 years, that pastors and conservative Christians just want to attack me. And I don't, somebody said, well, I think my wife said, well, you do to them, don't you? I would never invite someone from my church and start attacking them that they've got it all messed up. I do attack big systems when I talk about dishonesty, but I don't attack individuals. I honestly believe the people at my church are better people than I am. And I mean that. So I would never want to do that. And so now that's part of my depression that's continuing, is just feeling that there are people like us who want to tell the truth, but still want a relationship with Christ, have no place to go. I foolishly thought by getting more involved in my local church, because they are good people, that I would somehow help this loneliness. But my tenure there for almost a year in the small group, I always felt like I was, I talk about cultures, always evaluate for being cool, smart, and good. I always came out of this meeting feeling uncool, stupid, and bad for the suggestions I would raise. I think if I would say, hey, I want to do a class, Sunday school class, on the meaning of candles and stained glass, people would say, wow, that's exciting. But when I say, let's do a Sunday school class on, should we be at war? Should Israel be at war with Gaza? What's the history? Let's go back through the history of that conflict. Those things can create disagreements, and most churches do not want disagreements within their ranks. And that's why postmodernism is so attractive, because when you have no truth, you have no disagreements. I've said enough. Thanks for coming with me on this hike. Greta's still with me. So you guys have a wonderful day. I'm going to look at this and see if I can even use it. It may have been bumpy. All right, I may be back one more time or not. I'll let you know.